In this video, we are going to talk about Mog, some of its recent price action, the important support and resistance areas, and where we can expect the price of Mog to go in the next few days and weeks. So we'll start by looking at the weekly chart, and what we can see right here is that Mog has been in a very clear downtrend since 2024. Really, Mog has just been continuously dumping with no significant rallies since July of 2025. And right now, Mog is actually basically at its all-time low. It is looking absolutely devastating, honestly, for anyone who's been involved with Mog. It seems like no matter what happens with the rest of the crypto market, Mog just continues dumping. Even back in late 2025, when Bitcoin was creating new all-time highs and most of the crypto market was getting significant rallies, Mog just kept dumping and dumping. So currently, Mog has no support areas whatsoever. The only thing that really moves Mog at the moment is when Bitcoin and the rest of the crypto market do well and get a rally, then Mog gets a bit of a rally as well, like what we've seen from back in April when Bitcoin was getting the relief rally from about 60k all the way up to 82k. Mog also followed it and got a bit of a rally, but as soon as Bitcoin showed any type of weakness, Mog just continued dumping and created further all-time lows. Currently, Bitcoin is all the way back down at the low 60ks. It is at about 63k, and in my opinion, it is quite likely that Bitcoin will get a bit of a rally because it is so oversold and it has been very violently dumping. The RSI of Bitcoin is at incredibly oversold levels, and I would expect a bit of a rally for Bitcoin, probably somewhere to 70 to 75k or so, as I will show you on the Bitcoin chart as well later in the video. So it is possible for Mog to follow Bitcoin and get a bit of a rally as well. But even if it happens, which is not guaranteed whatsoever, but even if it does, then the rally would probably be very small and not sustained whatsoever. And I am expecting Mog to just continue dumping further, since we are still most likely in a bear market in my opinion, and I am expecting Bitcoin to continue dumping further and most of the crypto market to follow it. And with Mog being so weak, just continuously dumping no matter what happens with the rest of the crypto market, I can't say anything but that I am expecting Mog to just continue dumping further and creating further and lower new all-time lows like it has been doing for months now. So really looking at this weekly chart, I am not optimistic whatsoever. And guys, before I move on to the 4-hour chart, I just want to remind you that if you are enjoying this content and you want more updates about Mog as well as other meme coins and altcoins and the rest of the crypto market in general, make sure to subscribe. It helps the channel more than you know. And now let's go ahead and look at the 4-hour chart. So on the 4-hour chart for Mog, we can actually see that it very recently hit this trend line that I drew many months ago actually in one of my previous videos about Mog. So this is actually a pretty good sign that Mog might actually get a significant rally, at least in the short term. Again, as I showed you before on the weekly chart, I'm really not optimistic whatsoever, but on the 4-hour chart, Mog hitting this trend line is actually quite significant, and it could lead to it getting a rally all the way up to the upper trend line. We could draw a trend line, something like this. It's not exact or anything, but the idea is that it is in a downtrend channel and it can get a rally all the way up to the upper part of this channel. The exact levels are not what's important right here, but it is about a rally over 30%, could be a bit more, could be up to 40%. There are many significant support and resistance areas around here. It would be very speculative to try to get the exact numbers on the 4-hour chart, but the idea is that it is possible for it to get a bit of a rally. There's also this resistance area right here. There are a few more resistance areas that are significant, this one as well, and the trend line that I do here. And on the 4-hour chart, Mog is actually in a trend reversal. As you can see right here, we have Mog creating a new higher highs as well as higher lows. It is currently trying to create another higher low right here, so it is definitely possible for it to continue rallying in the coming days, maybe even for a few weeks. This could work very well if Bitcoin does get the relief rally that I am expecting it to get to over 70k probably sometime in the next few weeks. So there is a bit of an opportunity with Mog right here for sure. I wouldn't say that it's dead on the 4-hour chart, and it's not actually looking that bad, but we do have to remember that it is still very clearly in a downtrend, and that any rally that it gets will likely not be sustained. And as I showed you before on the weekly chart, I'm still very bearish on Mog. So not financial advice whatsoever, but I would only maybe consider being into Mog in a very short time frame, looking at what's happening and having very clear exit points. Really, with most altcoins, especially with the meme coins with such a low market cap like Mogcoin, they are not a long-term hold. The only real long-term hold in the crypto market is Bitcoin. possibly maybe Ethereum or some of the larger alts, but it's really just Bitcoin. And with such a small market cap meme coin, it is absolutely not a long-term hold. Again, not financial advice, but it wouldn't be very wise, in my opinion, to get into a coin like Mog for anything more than a couple of months at most. And these coming few days and weeks could be an opportunity for Mog on the 4-hour chart. And now let's look at the Mog against Bitcoin chart. This is very similar to the chart against the US dollar. This is basically the exact same, actually, the same structure. It is at all-time lows again. Maybe it has been holding on a little better right here since Bitcoin has also been dumping. Mog has just been dumping around the same amount in the recent weeks, but it is still very, very clearly in a downtrend against Bitcoin as well, and it is creating new all-time lows. And as I showed you before on the chart against the dollar, I would also expect it to continue creating new all-time lows against Bitcoin, at least on the weekly chart in the long term. And also in general, I'm quite bearish on altcoins as a whole, not just Mog. I think that since we are still most likely in a bear market, and historically in bear markets, Bitcoin outperforms most of the crypto market, and altcoins do absolutely horribly in the long term. I am expecting the same to happen this time, and historically for us to get an altcoin season, we first need to see Bitcoin getting into new all-time highs at the very least, which at the moment is very far away from being the reality in the market. Bitcoin is about 50% down from its all-time high, and we are still most likely going to be in a bear market for at least a few more months. I'm expecting most of 2026 to be a bear market year, really. So the chances of an altcoin season, of a major altcoin season at least, are very slim in my opinion. Of course, there can be some exceptions, but I don't see any reason to why Mog would be one of those exceptions on the weekly chart. And it is looking like it is just going to continue dumping both against the dollar and against Bitcoin in the long term. And now, as I promised before, we will look at the Bitcoin chart, and we can see that Bitcoin went all the way down to around 60k, which is also the February low that it got support from and started the relief rally from. We've seen Bitcoin drop all the way down to 60k from its all-time high, and then get a relief rally slowly but surely to 82k, and then much quicker it got a dump all the way back down to 60k, and from here it is getting a bit of support, trying to hold onto this area. This area of around 60k is also where Bitcoin was struggling a lot and consolidating back in 2024, and this is also where Bitcoin got rejected off of back in the bull market of 2021. It topped at around 64k or so, so this area is very significant for Bitcoin historically. And as I said before, I'm still expecting Bitcoin to continue dumping and for the rest of 2026 to be a bear market year. And I think a good target for the relief rally by Bitcoin from here, which I am expecting, is to this trend line, which would be to around 75k, somewhere around this area in the coming weeks. Bitcoin is still pretty clearly in a downtrend, but as I said before and in some previous videos, the RSI for Bitcoin is in incredibly oversold levels. On the daily chart, we can see that the Bitcoin RSI went all the way down to about 15, which is a similar area to where Bitcoin was at in terms of RSI and also in terms of price back in the February low. So we see Bitcoin revisiting the same area both for price and RSI, and last time it led to the relief rally all the way up to the trend line to 82k. So I would expect something similar, this time not to 82k but to the trend line, which as I said before is at over 70k. So this is a pretty reasonable target for a relief rally for Bitcoin in my opinion. But after that, I am expecting Bitcoin to continue dumping and eventually break below 60k further into the bear market. So while we get this relief rally, as I showed you before on the 4-hour chart for Mog, it is quite bullish actually. It's since Mog also hit the support area of the trend line on the 4-hour chart, we could potentially see a pretty significant relief rally by Mog of about 30 to 40%, as I showed you before. But again, in the long term, I'm expecting Bitcoin to continue dropping and Mog to continue to create new all-time lows. And really, I wouldn't expect Mog to recover anytime soon. It could take years before Mog creates any new significant highs. And in my opinion, it would require for Bitcoin to start doing much better and getting to new all-time highs, and the rest of the crypto market doing a lot better, which could take many more months, potentially even into 2027 or even more than that. So again, in the long term, I'm quite bearish about Mog, but in the short term, both for Bitcoin and Mog, there is potential for a relief rally. And now we'll look at the total 3 minus USDT against Bitcoin chart. This is a chart of the entire altcoin market against Bitcoin, and it shows how well altcoins are performing compared to Bitcoin. And as you can see right here, historically, what leads to altcoin seasons is this chart getting all the way down to the support area of around 0.25, as well as Bitcoin getting into new all-time highs and Ethereum getting to new all-time highs. Those two combined are what historically leads to altcoin seasons. We've seen this happen back in 2021 as well as in 2017. And right now, both of these conditions are very far away from being met. This chart is at 0.4, and which is significantly above 0.25, the support area, and also Bitcoin is 50% down from its all-time high, and Ethereum even more than that. So in my opinion, the chances of an altcoin season anytime soon are very slim to none, and I would expect it to only happen much further, not this year probably, possibly not even in 2027. So I am quite bearish about altcoins as a whole. Of course, this isn't financial advice whatsoever, but I would only consider getting into some altcoins very selectively that have a very good structure. Mog could potentially be one of those in the short term, but really beyond that, I would stick to mostly being into Bitcoin and maybe a bit of Ethereum. Not much more than that in the long term. In the last few weeks, we've actually seen altcoins outperforming Bitcoin, but I would expect this to not continue for very long. It is hard to predict what's going to happen in the short term with altcoins, but I would definitely expect in the long term for altcoins to underperform Bitcoin and for this chart to continue slowly trending down, as we've seen it do in the past few years, and it is still pretty clearly in a downtrend. And now let's go ahead and look at the Mogcoin page on CoinMarketCap. We can see here that the community sentiment is 88% bullish. This is actually a pretty high figure. Usually on altcoins we see figures from about 70 to 85% bullish. So 88% is quite high, which means that the community is very bullish about Mog. And with most altcoins, people are just blindly voting that they are bullish, but with this one, 88% is quite significant. And in the short term, as I showed you on the 4-hour chart, I could actually see why. I think a relief rally for Mog is actually quite likely sometime soon. So I could potentially agree with this community sentiment, but again, in the long term, not at all. And I would expect Mog to continue getting new all-time lows in the long term in the coming months and years. But really, at least for the next few days and weeks, I could definitely see Mog being bullish. And now we'll look at the crypto fear and greed index. This is currently at 15, which is an extreme fear. This is since we've seen Bitcoin get a very significant dump very quickly from 82k all the way down to 60k in just a few weeks. And the fear and greed index also dumped with it as well. I've talked about this probably happening a few weeks ago, since I was expecting Bitcoin to continue dropping to 60k, potentially even lower than that. As I said that I did expect the fear and greed index to go into extreme fear sometime in the coming weeks, and this has happened. But I don't think that we will stay here for a while, because I am expecting a bit of a relief rally soon. So we will probably get out of extreme fear, at least to moderate fear, potentially even into the neutral area, maybe even a bit into greed. But in the long term, I would expect us to go back down into extreme fear again, since I am expecting the bear market to continue and us to go all the way back down to 60k and probably even lower than that, even after the relief rally that I am expecting. And we could actually be in extreme fear for a pretty prolonged period of time, potentially for many weeks. So if this does happen, make sure not to panic or make any rushed decisions. Just remember, we are in a bear market. This is what happens. And after a bear market, we get a bull market, just like in every other cycle. Again, not financial advice whatsoever, but just remember that crypto and Bitcoin are very volatile, and bear markets just happen. It is very typical in bear markets for dumps to be very quick, while rallies are only slow. This is of course since the overall trend in bear markets is downward. Downward momentum is just going to be stronger and quicker. I will keep making updates on this channel, and I try to really stay level-headed with what I'm saying right here. I never try to hype anything up for no reason, or trying to make anyone FOMO or get into fear for no reason. I just look at things and say what I think honestly. So if you appreciate it and you want more updates about crypto, about Mog as well as other altcoins, make sure to subscribe. It helps the channel a lot. And now finally, let's go ahead and look at the altcoin season index. So the altcoin season index is currently at 47, which is basically right in the middle between Bitcoin season and altcoin season, which means that Bitcoin has been performing right in the middle of the top 100 altcoins in the crypto market. In recent weeks, as I showed you on the total 3 minus USDT against Bitcoin chart, altcoins have actually been outperforming Bitcoin for the most part. So this has been slowly climbing away from Bitcoin season, but I am still expecting in the long term for this to continue dropping into Bitcoin season, and I think that we will be in Bitcoin season very firmly below 25 right here for many months probably. And for the reasons I showed you before, I am quite bearish on altcoins and also about Mog in the long term. In the short term, there is some potential. But yeah, guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.